Good evening, everyone. We are welcome to yet another session. And edition of our class. We want to say a very big welcome to the members and students of the 10th cohort. I believe we had a great time yesterday where we had the introduction to polytracy and governance. Today we'll be looking at the legislative arm. And I am your host, and it's a pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Electoral College Nigeria. Please, when we come in, some of our ground rules remain. When you come in, please put your name in the chat box and ensure that the names that you place are as you would love to see them on your certificates at the end of this session sometime next year. We're grateful that you are here, and I would just give like 2 more minutes before I hand over to our facilitator for this evening. She's already on the call, but we will just give a minute or two for other participants to join. We'll kickstart at 5:05 exactly.
All right, good evening, everyone. Just before the facilitator comes up, let me just pass across some important information. So my name is Rumin Hassan Bello. I'm the head of polytracy. It's a pleasure to welcome you all here. Sorry, I was unavoidably absent yesterday being the first class, but I'm sure you had a great time with the executive director and the person of Mr. Kunle Lawal. All right, you're all welcome once again. So this is just to reiterate some of our rules. I hope the Zoom on the Telegram group, I beg your pardon. I hope you've seen all the rules. You have to meet up at least 70%, 75% for attendance and 80% for assignments for you to get a certificate. Yes. So we have like a total of 26 classes. So you have to attend at least 20 for you to qualify for a certificate. So please, I will urge us all to take the classes seriously. Make sure you come on time and make sure you stay till the end. Don't just come in and then write your name and then leave. No, we're taking note of that too. You have to attend at least an hour of class for you to have been deemed to have attended that particular class. So please, let's take note of this. A lot has been put in place to ensure that this class is up and running. So, and it's free. So please, let's not take it for granted. Let's give our best to it. And it's going to be an impactful time. I can assure you it's going to be an impactful time. You're going to learn a lot. Yes. And then also, you'll be shared into groups by next week. You hear more on that. You'll be shared into various groups from next week for assignments and all that. So I just needed to say this so we can give our utmost dedication to the classes. Yes, so that at the end of the class, you don't start asking, why didn't I qualify, for a certificate? So please, these are our rules, and I hope that we'll all abide by them. If you have any challenges, feel free to reach out to any of the admin on the Telegram group. Just go through and you see those that have the admin function and you can reach out to them if you have any challenge. Once again, you're welcome to an awesome time. It's going to be an awesome journey, and we're glad to have you here. Thank you so much. I think Nella is in class, so I'll just hand over to her. Nella, you're welcome. Always a pleasure to have you.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa. I just wanted to read a short bio for the facilitator, Nella.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, so Nella, who is our facilitator for this evening, will be taking us on the legislature. She is a cross-sectional policy and legal professional with vast experience in various fields, including policy advisory, litigation, commercial law, communications, and the non-governmental sector. She is the special advisor on policy and communications to the senator representing Cross River South Senatorial District and a partner at Lex Global Partners LP. She has been the communications officer at a non-governmental organization which successfully initiated several community development programs. And she is also an associate at a top-tier Nigerian litigation and commercial law firm. She believes that access to quality health and lifelong education, fair work opportunities, and inclusive, as well as protective institutions, would contribute immensely to creating the critical mass that will drive Nigerians' change. She stands currently as the Deputy Executive Director of the Electoral College of Nigeria. She's an active member of Rotary International and a fellow of the 2021 Elect Her Future Lawmakers programs. That's the inaugural cohort. She also holds an LLB honors degree from the University of Edinburgh, UK, and has been called to the Nigerian bar. Lastly, she was an aspirant and a runner-up for the Cross River State House of Assembly, Calabar South Constituency 1. And in the recently concluded party, well, that was the concluded party primary some time ago. So with a lot of emojis in the chat box, let's make welcome our facilitator for this evening, Nella and Ewa, even as she takes us on the legislature and all that pertains to it. Welcome, ma'am. You have the virtual lecture and I hand it over to you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, so I'm trying to set up my okay, can you see me too?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, sorry, I was having a bit of okay, thank you. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second class in this cohort. We'll be taking the legislative arm, and I think we'll just jump right in because I know today is the World Cup opening ceremony, and I think the first match is starting now, so I'm sure a lot of people would like to catch some of that. So this is very important, and so we will do this and then try to do it as quickly as possible. So the legislative arm of government. First of all, we have in every democratic / federal system of government, you have the arms of government. So you have the sorry, this isn't the slide. This is the notes.
Oh, okay. It's usually easier to share the PDF. Let me just convert the other one to PDF then. I didn't know they were different.
No, they were.
Okay.
That was just like that's more wordy.
Oh, okay. Give me a minute.
This is more wordy. Oh, I can send you that.
Do you have the PDF of the PowerPoint?
I do. I can send that now. I'll send.
Okay.
Do I send it to your WhatsApp?
Yes, please.
I'll send that now.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Give me 1 second. You should have received it.
Yes, send.
Okay. So I mean, I'll just keep talking while Lisa helps with that. Thank you. So we have the arms of government, 3 different arms, or you can call them branches of government. You have the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. The executive is headed by the president. The legislative arm of government at the national level is headed by there are 2. We run a bicameral legislature at the federal level. So we have 2 houses, the Senate, which has the Senate president, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives. But the Senate is considered as they say, the upper chamber. So he's actually the chairman of the National Assembly. Then on the other end, you have the judiciary, which is headed by the CJ and the Chief Justice of the Federation. And the thing is, to have these 3 arms of government in a democratic society, in a society that works, or is in an ideal scenario, they work together, but also serve as a check and balance on each other, which is where the word separation of powers comes in, which is essentially a principle that ensures that each arm of government works together, but also serves as a check, or another word would be a monitor of the other one, so as to avoid the use of the powers or the responsibilities being used in an arbitrary fashion. Because as the next slide says, or even the quote in this slide, it says, if the same person has the power to make laws and execute them, they may exempt themselves from the laws they make and use the law to their own private advantage. It is human nature. If you have a bit of power, you want to test the limits of your power. If you give a child a cookie and the child sees where you got the cookie from, he or she will climb the chair and try to reach for it, even if you've told the child, don't touch it. It comes naturally to every human being. So in a government system where there are several branches and there are several individuals and several interest groups and several respective powers within that system, it is important that there is some form of regulation of powers, as well as an avenue to hold each other accountable. So in an ideal scenario, each arm of government, none of them is more powerful than the other, but they all serve to check each other. And there's this little equation I wrote: politics plus government equals power. Politics and government are not the same thing. Government is the body or the institution or the constitution of the people who exercise their control or their power over either their country or their community, or even in a family unit. And that is where the politics comes in. Politics is that exercise of it is the way in which you conduct the governance of that country. The perfect way to explain this would be to say, think of if you watched any American high school movie where you have, like, for example, Mean Girls, if anyone of you that has watched that, you have the group of popular kids who sort of run the school. The Stacy, Rachel, or whoever, that is the government. But the way in which they let people in to their group, the way in which they punish people for not being in within the group, how they elect the queen bee, whatever mechanism, that is the politics, that is the play. And when those two things come together, you are guaranteed to have some form of power. Please, next slide. Yes. So no, this is just another quote that emphasizes why we're having such a class. Powerful people cannot afford to educate the people that they oppress, because once you are truly educated, you will not ask for power, you will take it. We see this every day, and Nigeria, unfortunately, is a perfect example of such a thing, where if you feel the people who you govern or you lead or you are supposed to be in charge of do not have an understanding of their rights or of what it is that, of the powers that they actually have, even though they may appear to not be in a position of power, then you try to keep it that way because you continue to enjoy the benefits that come from that power, and you sort of form an oligarchy of people who dictate and ensure that all the wealth, all the benefits, all the enjoyment that comes from living in a rich and a resource-rich and large society as ours go to just a few, as opposed to the 60-something million people who are living, well, in addition to the others, who are living in extreme poverty, for example. So, that's why it's important for us to continue to spread the politeracy gospel, continue to enlighten ourselves. Every day we learn more. We need to understand what it is that the government is and the role we play as the electorate within that system. Next slide. So speaking of this specific class, we're talking about the legislative houses of government. So the legislative house, you have the National Assembly, which is the federal house, which is split into Senate and House of Representatives. Then at the state level, you have each state has a state house of assembly. So there are 36 state houses of assembly in Nigeria because there are 36 states. The FCT is not a state, as we will explain later on. Then we have the local government legislative councils, but for this class, we are only focusing on the national and state. There is another class for local governments. Next slide, please. So at the Senate, you have 3 senators per state and 1 senator for the Federal Capital Territory. So that's a total of 109 senators. The Senate is headed by the Senate President, as you saw his picture, and then there's a Deputy Senate President. Now, the Senate is divided the way it is so as to ensure equal representation of each state. So regardless of the size of the state or the population within that state, each state has just 3 senators equally. So you have an equal vote on the floor of the Senate so as to reflect that each state is equal before the law and in Nigeria. This is the next slide. You have I don't know, it hasn't come up, but you have the House of Representatives, which is the lower chamber or the green chamber, while the other is the upper or the red. And that is supposed to reflect proportionate or direct representation. So the House of Representatives isn't 3 members per state. It's based on it's a proportionate representation. So based on the proportion or the population representation within that state, as opposed to the size of the state. Now, so this is now supposed to be more reflective of population, and I guess you can also say size, because of most likely more people, well, supposedly. Now there are 360 members, varying in sizes based and within the states, and it's because of that. So you have one house which is each state is equal, and you have another house which is technically saying each individual has an equal representation. Then it's headed by the Speaker and Deputy Speaker. Now you have the legislative lists. This is before we go into the states. So within each house, the legislative houses are supposed to pass laws, and they have legislative powers afforded them by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So now, what are those specific powers that they have? Each the federal legislative house has exclusive legislative powers. So these are powers that are conferred by the Constitution for the National Assembly to make laws on matters that are within the exclusive legislative list, which are exclusive to the National Assembly and the federal, that is the Federal Legislative House. So the State House of Assembly has no jurisdiction to make laws in regards to the items within that list. There are 12 items specifically, and I think in the notes I sent earlier, there were the laws, the part of where it is in the Constitution was stated. So you can go and read them, and if you're interested. Then the concurrent legislative list. Now this is where you find the items sorry, there are 68. My mistake. There are 68 items in the exclusive. In the concurrent, there are 12. And now that is where you have matters that are shared between the federal and state legislative houses. So that's why it's concurrent. So they make laws concurrently. But one thing is clear: the federal legislative house or houses are supreme. That the National Assembly is supreme. Any law that the State House of Assembly makes on concurrent matters that are in contravention or not in accordance with maybe a law that was already made by the National Assembly will not hold any water, because the Federal Legislative House is the supreme and main superior legislative house in Nigeria as provided by the Constitution. Now you have the residual list. Now these are any matters that you don't find in the exclusive legislative list or the concurrent legislative list. Now these go to the residual list and give the state legislative state houses those powers which are also delegated to the local government, which is how you have bylaws and things like that. But we won't really go into that because that'll also be discussed in the other class. Please, next slide. So it's not just supposed to give you an idea of what type of laws each house can make at the different tiers of government. Now, the House of Assembly. So as we said, each state has a House of Assembly, so they are 36 in number. And the FCT is not a state. It's represented by the National Assembly because it is a federal capital territory. The State House of Assembly, I guess if you were to compare the State House of Assembly to any other legislative house, any of the federal legislative houses, that's either the Senate or the House of Reps, you would say it mirrors the House of Representatives because it is also about equal population in terms of representation. It's supposed to be a proper representation of every constituency within that state. It's usually there are about 3 to 4 times the number of seats in the House of Representatives that you would have in the State House of Assembly. So, for example, in my state, there are 25 seats at the State House of Assembly and 8 at the federal. So it tends to be about that in each state, but it varies based on population and the proportion in terms of representation. It's also headed by a speaker and deputy speaker. Please, next slide. So now the functions of the legislative arm of government. There's several functions. You can break them down into smaller bits, but in general, there are 3. We have lawmaking, oversight function, and representation. Please, next slide. So now, to the legislative part to make laws. I think we'll just have a small exercise here. For example, if you say you're a legislator, whether at the state or federal level, let's say you're a federal legislator, and you are thinking of sponsoring a bill, and your people, whether your constituency members, your consultants, your legislative aides, or a pressure group has come to you with a bill. So I guess 2 groups have come to you with 2 different bills, or even you've thought of 2 different bills that you're considering, you're thinking about sponsoring on the floor. And you represent a community that has a lot of, like a large expanse of arable land, really a bit untapped, where you have a bit of climate issues. So it's a bit irregular in terms of rains. And then you have a lot of people, untapped human capital, a lot of young active people. And you have these 2 potential bills you could sponsor. One is to build a seed technology institute where you would have a research facility and improve the use of seeds and seedlings and in agriculture. And then you have another proposal, which is a bill that would ultimately, so the first one would be like an establishment bill, which we have a lot of in Nigeria. Then the second one would be a bill to say, it's more of an electrification bill, but the underlying goal would be to allow more affordable electricity to local farmers and small farm holders, so that they can pump water in their artisan wells and properly irrigate their farms. So now these are two options. Honestly, both are good bills, but based on the general the issues that have been put forward, you can just drop it in the chat box as we go along, which of the bills you think is a bit maybe more relevant to your community or should be a priority. I can see someone has said B. Let's see what other people say. B, yes. I've seen like 3 or 4 Bs. Yes, at the end of the day, one could say there is no wrong answer, because I guess it depends on how well it has been argued, or the cases have been argued, or what you think. But I would say, but I think if I was to choose, I would also say B, because you at the end of the day, you have to think of the long-term impact and long-term benefits as well, and also the short-term needs of your community. And if we are all considering in terms of Nigeria, for example, there's a serious food shortage crisis that is already here. Some are saying it's looming, but it's already here. So, but these are some of the considerations that a legislator would have to think about, because you would also have to think about budgetary considerations, because you have to assign some money to build that institute when it comes to the budgetary season. But then you would also have to think of raising the funds for number B. So it's, I said number B, letter B. Okay, some hands are raised. Okay, we can take some, I think Ernest.
Okay, Nella, do you want to take the questions now or after the class?
If it's a question regarding the last thing, sure. If not, I mean, it would be good to just have all the questions at the end. But if it's maybe a question or a comment in relation to the bills,
okay,
we can just quickly have that.
All right.
Okay, I think no one is going. I think we'll just carry on. So we.
Oh, okay.
And then anyone who has a question can ask at the end. Okay, so next, the process of passing a bill, or getting a bill passed rather. So the process of sponsoring a bill. There are different types of bills. You have executive bills, which are bills that come from the executive arm of government. You have members' bills, which ultimately every bill becomes a members' bill, because no bill can be passed or can be sponsored on the floor without a member. A member is the only one. So when I say member, as a senator or a House of Representatives or State House of Assembly member, only those people can sponsor a bill on the floor of any of the houses. And then you have, so let's go into how you get a bill passed. So first, you have the presentation and first reading, which is the first stage. That is where the bill comes in on the floor of the House for the first time. It's introduced by the clerk of that house, and it's read for the first time. And that's literally it. It's just the information of the bill is put forward, and everyone, all the members will go back and read the bill and come up. Now at the second reading, that's where everyone has had the time to, I guess, digest the bill, and either they're for or against it. Some lobbying would have been done. Then at this stage, the second reading is where you now argue on the merits or demerits of the bill. But whoever sponsored the bill, this is where they've really tried to make a case for their bill. So this is where you often have what's called the lead debate, which is where whoever sponsored the bill would argue for the bill. And at the end of that, those who are against the bill would we have a retort, or those who are for the bill will concur and give their reasons why they support the bill. Now, if this bill is, if it passes this stage, then it goes to the committee stage. But if it doesn't, it ends then. Whoever sponsored the bill has to either go and tweak it or do some more lobbying to get to garner some more support for the bill. So the next time it comes to the floor, it will pass that stage. So let's say it goes to the committee stage. At this stage, this is where the bill will go to, each house has committees. So these are basically smaller groups of members who will form a committee that its main goal is a specific area or issue. So for example, you have the committee on finance, you have committee on national planning, you have committee on agriculture. You have there are several committees in each house. So if a bill, you have the committee on education. So for example, if a bill is predominantly predominantly touches on education, then automatically it would go to the Committee on Education. If it touches on several areas, so for example, a bill maybe touches on education and finance and even national planning, but the overarching issue is education, it would go to education. But sometimes you have a committee made up of individuals from the different houses to deliberate on an issue. But usually, and those are more specific issues, but it is a committee, it will go to the house that the bill is focused on. So at that stage, that's when the committee will either alter the bill, or they'll rewrite it or block it. But before then, they will invite either the public or interest groups or MDAs to come and either make a case for the bill or against the bill, or if they're unclear about some things that the bill may impact, they would invite either experts or consultants to address the committee on those issues. So this is the stage where the public is basically open to make a contribution either for or against the bill. If it passes this stage, then it goes to the report stage, which is where the chairman of that committee would come to the floor and present their findings and essentially a report before the House. And if it's adopted, if it goes well, it goes to the third reading. Now, this is the final stage for the House or members to either make a case for or against, if they want something to be added or removed. This is that stage. This is the last stage for that to happen. So if it passes this stage, that means so let's say the bill emerged in the Senate. That's if we're speaking of the Federal Legislative House now. If the bill emerged in the Senate, then if it gets to the third reading and passes that stage, the Senate has essentially passed the bill within their house, and then a clean copy of the bill is taken to the clerk of the House of Representatives, and this process starts again. Essentially, this is so that both houses can come up with a harmonized single bill. In the event that there are conflicting sections or parts of the bill, they would have to have a harmonization or joint conference committee, which is essentially where members from both houses come together to harmonize the bill. But it's only on issues that are conflicting. So no new issues are brought up, no new sections are amended. It's only the parts of the bill that were different that they have to come together on and ultimately produce a single bill. Once, if they successfully do this, and everything is passed successfully by both houses, the bill that the National Assembly has basically passed the bill, and that's where we get to the president, this stage for presidential assent. Now, at this stage, the bill is forwarded to the president for his assent, and once he gives his assent, the bill becomes an act if it's at the federal level, or a law if it's at the state level. However, if the president doesn't assent to the bill or doesn't even comment on, or just if he stays silent or if he vetoes it, this is where the legislative, the power of the legislative arm of government comes in to veto the bill, which I guess is what you could call a legislative veto. At this stage, the legislative arm of government or the National Assembly would have to come up with a 2/3 majority vote to override the presidential veto. And at that stage, but that's within 30 days of, if after 30 days of presenting the bill to the president, he doesn't assent to it or is silent or vetoes it, then they can override that the president with their legislative veto powers. Please, the next slide. Oh, and then once all of that is done, you have an act or a law, depending on the level. So the second function of the legislative arm of government is the oversight function. This is one of the where the principle of separation of powers comes into play, because this is the stage where this is the power that the legislative arm has, or the legislative arm of government has, to be a check and hold the other arms of government accountable for their actions. The powers include investigative powers, which essentially this is where they can call either an MDA or an executive official, an executive arm of government official, they can investigate the activities rather of such an individual based on laws that the legislative arm of government has passed. Or so these are the actions of the executive in relation to the powers conferred on them by the legislative arm of government's laws. So it just shows how each arm of government is supposed to either hold the other one accountable or work in accordance with the other. They can also investigate matters that or the conduct of the executive arm of government, executive officials. Then you have evidential powers, and this is where the legislative arm of government can gather the necessary evidence or information, or even examine people who could be material to an investigation, hence the investigative powers, to an investigation that is being conducted. They can summon any person in Nigeria to give evidence, and they can also issue a warrant to ensure that a person attends an investigative hearing. We've had instances of this. A popular one was the NDCZ, or acting DG. Then that was a at least high-profile scenario where everyone, at least most people, were aware of that. And well, we know how that turned out, or didn't. Then you have the power of the purse. Now, this is essentially the legislative arm of government is supposed to have immense powers over the finances of the nation, in the sense that the budgetary allocations are approved by the National Assembly or the State House of Assembly. Budget has to be passed by the National Assembly. All MDAs are eventually called to the National Assembly to defend their budgets. This is actually, we are currently in the budget season. A lot of heads of institutions have been attending hearings and have been invited to National Assembly to come and defend their budgets, or their MDA's budgets, because each MDA will prepare a budget which becomes the national budget, and that has to be defended before the National Assembly. So it is obvious that these are serious powers, that so the National Assembly has the power to reject a budget or interrogate a budget so well that you can account for where every single naira is going to. They also have the powers to audit public accounts, and then they can implement the appropriation bill, appropriation process, which ultimately ends up being what you see called the Appropriations Act, which is the budget. So at the end of this process, when the bill is eventually passed and assented to, it becomes the Appropriation Act. But that is literally the budget of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Then they have the power, impeachment, confirmation, or removal powers. This oversight function allows the legislative arm of government the power to remove a president or vice president, governor, deputy governor, which is called impeachment. They can also confirm appointments of ministers and commissioners, commissioners at the state level, principal representatives or ambassadors of Nigeria. Then they also have the power to confirm and remove judicial officers. But usually, so an appointment that is done by the executive has to be confirmed by the legislative arm of government. If it's not confirmed, this is the theoretic, like in an ideal scenario, if it's not confirmed, that officer cannot take office. Please, next slide. The third function is the representation. This is essentially the function, to arguably the most important function of a legislator, because this is your role is to represent your constituency members. You are in office, you got into office by the votes of your constituency members, or through the votes of your constituency members. Without them, there is no office to represent. There's no office. There's no office because there are no people to represent. So next slide. So ultimately, this is the part you should listen to the concerns and opinions of your constituency members. Meaning you can't be a legislator if you do not know what the people think. You need to be able to, at least on a regular basis, defer to the people, understand what they think on an issue, especially in times like this. There are a lot of things we can say a crisis going on. We have climate change issues. We have, as you remember, the floodings that are ongoing and were quite intense earlier between last month and this month, and are a constant and recurring issue in Nigeria. You have the food shortage crisis, you have high unemployment rates, but these things are more pressing in some communities. We have crime, we have serious crime rates. These are more pressing in some regions and some states and some constituencies. So while others are more important in others. So it's important to know what is most pressing or more important to your people at any given time, because this will give you the insight needed to articulate and advocate for their views, their needs, their concerns, and address them either on the floor or when you're conducting your oversight functions. and you're supposed to oversee and scrutinize the performance of the executive in implementing projects utilizing public funds, as I said, the power of the purse, and the execution of the law. Now, that is quite important because, again, separation of powers, but more closer to home, it's really about knowing that that oversight function is ultimately how you conduct or how you exercise that power affects the people you represent. Because, for example, if an allocation has been given to build certain maybe primary healthcare centers or even schools, or build or repair roads, or build an airport, build something, anything really, in a community that is under your constituency, the repercussions, or there will be repercussions for your people, depending on how well that project is carried out, how well those public funds are utilized. There could be job creation, or there could be no job creation. There could be better access to healthcare, or what is there will deteriorate, meaning your people have less access to healthcare, which has a ripple effect, the ability to go to work, the ability to go to school, that's why everything is a network, everything works together. So it's understanding your functions and understanding why you are there that would, I guess, give you a good conscience to do what you're supposed to do, or at least serve as an internal accountability officer when you are in that office. But they always say something, when you get there, you will change. I guess that's based on what people have seen over the years. But I believe that the more people who, before they even get there, have an understanding of what they're supposed to do and have an understanding of the accountability that they carry, it may begin to change or reshape the way we see legislators or we act when we become legislators. Please, the next slide. So, just as a little addition, I believe that being a legislator or aspiring to become a legislator is like selling a product. And as constituency members, or as the electorates, we're all Nigerians, we're all from different parts of Nigeria, but ultimately we're all Nigerians. And we are in that season where we have people who are trying to sell themselves to us to be our next president. So they are selling a product ultimately. And at the state level, as aspiring senators, House of Rep members, and at the state level, also at the state level, aspiring House of Assembly members, aspiring governors. These people are all selling, even local government councillors and chairmen, and all women. These are people who are selling a product. And the product is right now them and the agenda they are bringing to bear, or they hope to bring to bear, which should be in their manifestos. If we as the electorate don't see or compare it to when you want to buy something. So if, for example, you go to a fast food restaurant and today they serve you soggy chicken, they call them, let's use Chicken Republic, they say they're Chicken Republic. So clearly they are selling chicken. And that's their main product. And you go there today, you buy soggy chicken. It's not crispy, it's not crunchy. It doesn't make you close your eyes and think of, the good things in life. You would naturally say, I'm not going there again. Or you say, I want to see your manager, depending on how combative you're feeling that day. But why is it different when it comes to who is going to either represent us at the legislative arm or governors at the executive arm? We need to see them as a package that has been sold to us. So even if they somehow slide through the cracks and get in for the first time, after 4 years, they are going to try to resell that product, especially because legislators can sell themselves to you over and over again. We have some people who have been there some people were not born when they were there, and now they are still there. So how is it that we are regurgitating and allowing this to continue to happen? Because it's not a product that we collectively, we don't see them as products. You know what I mean? We don't see them as selling a product to us, because if they have not performed, or there was some form of misrepresentation, they haven't lived up to what they said they would deliver on, they shouldn't go back. It's actually it should be as simple as that. But as we know, political system is not always clear cut. Next slide. Okay, so speaking on critical mass impact, it's going back to what we just discussed about the product. It says, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And that's the truth. If we begin to see things a certain way, if we begin to see the legislative process as what it is, for what it is, and how vital and crucial it is, and how important it is to have certain people or certain types of people in office, and also the fact that they have sold a product. If they haven't successfully delivered in 4 years, kick them out and try someone else. Or at least you try to get them out. It shouldn't be a walk in the park to get in again after delivering a terrible service, ultimately, because you're there to serve. If more people begin to think a certain way, then you find that even from that crop of people begin to say, I want to run for office. And they already know who they are accountable to, because they were part of the people who were fighting for the change. So it's a slow process, but those groups or people need to start coming together, which is something that Electoral College has been doing for a while, and a lot of other CSOs are doing. But even outside of that space, within our own small nuclear environments, pockets of change everything over time, or at least have an impact on the larger scheme of things. And that's essentially what critical mass impact should lead to eventually. Please, the next slide. Okay, so now this is constitutional right to proper representation. Each, as the electorate, or as a member of the electorate, or in Nigerian, you have certain rights that have been conferred or given to you by the Constitution. These include the right to participate in the electoral process and even vie for elective office. As a person, or as part of the people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, these are rights that have been given to you and they are guaranteed in the Constitution. Secondly, since we're speaking about the legislative arm of government, constituency members have the constitutional right to recall legislators who they feel are representing them poorly in the legislature. So there's actually a provision so that you don't have to wait for 4 years. And this is section 69 and 110, depending on federal or state law, federal or state legislative houses. Essentially, this power is the power for you to recall your current legislator, and to do that, you need more than half of the registered voters in that constituency to sign a petition and submit it to the INEC chairman, expressing the loss of confidence in that legislator. So this isn't the people who voted, this is people who are registered to vote. So you need just half, well, not just, you need half of the registered voters in that constituency. And this comes back to critical mass impact. If more people think the same or have a better understanding, and the intention behind things are more greater good, in the consciousness is more about, the collective good, the greater good, we as opposed to I. Some of these things will be a lot easier to achieve. But speaking of the procedure, once you submit it to the INEC chairman, the INEC has to confirm the signatures. They have to verify that these are real signatures, basically comparing them with those of the registered voters who have signed the petition. And once that is confirmed, INEC would then conduct a referendum within that constituency within 90 days of the petition, just to be sure and get the community approval that this petition is valid and it is the will of the people. But this is a simple majority vote, and a simple majority vote of the registered voters. And once if the referendum is in the fall, and after a few administrative steps, such as informing the legislator, giving him a chance to speak, there's no back and forth. He or she will be recalled. The reality, well, but that is a constitutional right. Please, the next slide. Okay, thank you. So after we've had, we've gone through all the slides, and this is just the second class in this cohort. But the truth is, we should all know what to do. At least slowly, we should begin to have a better understanding. I mean, to be in this class, you already know what to do, I would believe. But the thing is, more people need to come to terms with the reality that as the electorate, we have more power than we have been giving ourselves. Or we've been allowing ourselves to express. Because if we know ourselves, either, oh, I am someone who can run for office, you step up. If you know, oh no, I would rather stay in the private sector and sponsor people to run for office. You know that, or I'm a good canvasser, I'm a good organizer, I can get people to vote, I can, on election day, I can, I know how to gather people, get them, do the logistics of it, get them on the bus, get them to the polling unit. I am someone who can be an agent. I will be able to stand there and protect the votes of my fellow citizens. Or there's several roles we can play. Or you're someone who can speak out, educate more people so that they even be ahead of time. They are a bit more conscious about the power of their vote. You do that. If you want to get you should already have registered for your PVC. So now it's time to go and collect it, because registering for your PVC is nothing. If you don't collect it, you're actually giving more powers to potentially giving more power to someone who you may not have voted for, or who you will not want, or who may be really bad for Nigeria. So go and you've already done that work, just get it. Go through the pain, and I would encourage anyone to actually everyone to collect, those who are registered and don't have it yet, to do that now. Don't wait till it's time for the election, like a month to election. You won't be able to enter that office. Just get it now. Join a political party. There are going to be elections in another 4 years, but between now and then, there are a lot of things that happen within the party structure that actually give you a better say in the decisions. It's not when they've gone through primaries and they've picked the candidate, everyone complained, but it took a lot to get to that candidate. There were primary elections which were voted for by delegates, and delegates are supposed to be active members within the party, but there are people who have other roles to play within the party structure. And it's important for people to get involved, be actively involved. You also get involved in your local community. It's not only about being involved in the political party process. You can get involved in your community. There are community leaders who have a great say, who if they say, I think this should happen, everyone just goes that way. It's the society we find ourselves in. So if we can channel that power to the greater good, get involved in your local community, decide to run for office if that's your choice, support someone who's running for office, or support someone who is already in office, either being an aide. As we saw that example of A and B, a lot of the time it's people who come up with these bills or motions or memos for action at the different levels of government or tiers of government, executive, legislative. It's consultants and advisors that sometimes are the ones who come up with these things. So if you're in a position to profess solutions, why not? You will make a better legislator of whoever you are providing that service to. Identify your representatives and hold them accountable. It is important we know who our representatives are at every level, from your local government chairperson to your councillor to your even at the ward level. You have a ward chairman, you have a ward ESCO at every single level. It's important to know. So it's not just who the president is or your senator is. At every level, hold them accountable, because even the ones that are appointed, they should be held accountable because they have a responsibility to the people. And ask candidates the right questions. Like we all know, the election processes, the elections are a few days away now. Less than, I believe, 90 days away. Yeah. So it's important that any opportunity we have, yes, you may not directly have access to the candidates, even though we should, at least to ask these questions, but there are avenues to throw questions at them. And hopefully, as we continue to evolve as a democratic society, we would have better forums for these questions to be posed to them, because I do not understand or know why a candidate should not explain to us what their position on addressing climate change issues would be right now. At least we should know what each candidate's position is on climate change, I think. But that's just one example of several questions we should ask them. At least these are things within their purview. There are some things that are not the role of the executive. We won't ask the executive that, like, oh, what law would you pass? That would not be a question for them. But the same way we can ask the legislative arm of government, oh, which borehole would you build, or which road are you going to fix? That's why we should know. We are supposed to know these things as the electorate. And lastly, vote on the 2 election days that are coming up. And then when it comes to local government elections as well, be involved. But for now, vote on the 2 election days, and for all those offices, not just the president, because they are all connected and there are ripple effects. Well, thank you. There was a last quote, and that's, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. I think that is what we're all trying to do. We need to take steps. We've seen the issues. We always say this is the problem, that's the problem. So since the problem is so serious, then we need to come up with a different solution that makes the problem, it just can't match the solution we've come up with. So we need to be aggressively involved and take this thing called politics and governance into our own hands as the people. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed the class. I'll quickly take a few questions, and then I guess we can catch the end of the match. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Nella, for us and within the weekend. And that has spurred tons and tons of questions in the chat box. Before we begin to take hands, but if we have participants on the Zoom call who would be willing to, or who want indicate by raising up your hands whilst we take the questions in the chat box. But let's start with the questions that I have seen so far. Okay, we have, how often do the legislatives meet to pass a bill? Could this be weekly, monthly, or annually? And let's take the first two together. The first question actually says, are there cases where a bill can pass? Secondly, how often do our legislators meet to pass a bill? So we take those first two questions, and then we move on quickly. We should be rounding this session off on or before 6:30. Nella.
Hi, sorry, I didn't hear the first question. I had, how often do they, did you ask, how often do they meet?
Yes, how often do the senators or the legislators meet? Is it
Okay.
on a weekly basis, monthly or annual basis? And the
Okay.
second question is, are there cases where the bill can pass more than third reading? So those are the first two questions.
Okay. So the second was how of if they can pass the third reading. So I didn't understand. Is it how? Hello.
Yes, I'm with you.
It's not very clear.
How often? Is it weekly or monthly or annual?
Oh no, they normally sit 3
Can you
days
hear
a
me
week.
now?
No, I can hear you.
Okay.
But they sit 3 days a week. That's the official currently. But then during then this is the practical side. I'm not speaking of what it is in the constitution. This is the practical side. They sit 3 days a week. Well, they used to sit 3 days a week. Then when COVID-19 happened, it got reduced, and they started sitting 2 days a week. Obviously, during the lockdown, there were no sittings, but currently it's 2 days. Now they are supposed to, by law, sit for a minimum of, I always forget, I believe it's 180 days. I will confirm that, but I believe it's 180 days that they are supposed to at least sit for. Maybe I would check that right now, but I believe it's 180 days. That they are supposed to, at least you can't sit for less than that, but they have their practice and procedures, so they can determine how that is done. There's no, if they want to sit 5 days a week, that's up to them. But then there's a minimum number of days they have to sit for. Whether they actually sit for the required days, well, I don't know. That's well, but right now it's 2 days. So you may ask how, if that's enough time to deliberate on the issues of our great nation. Oh, then the second question was if it passes. Sorry, if a bill can pass the third reading. What do you mean if there's like a fourth reading? I'm not really sure or clear on the question.
Yes, I guess what the person is asking is if there's another stage past the third reading.
Okay, well, I mean, I think I explained that in the class. There's nothing called the fourth reading, because after that stage, that's the end of that legislative house's role until after the conference stage. So there are two houses in federal level. So you have Senate and House of Reps. After the third reading, it has passed in the Senate if it started in the Senate, and then it has to go to the reps to start all over again. So they have to go through all of that again, so that there's a concurrent bill, one bill from the National Assembly, which now goes to the president. So after the third reading, it ultimately just goes to the second house for concurrence. And if there are issues, like I said, there's a conference, blah, blah, blah. I think I discussed that in the class. So
yes.
I hope that's clear.
Okay, so let's take one question by Mohammed. His hand has been raised. It was raised earlier during the class. Let's unmute him. We'll ask you to unmute now if Mohammed is still on the call. If he isn't, we will move on to the next set of questions. The next set of questions we have, please kindly shed more light. Okay, no. The question says that should legislators be paid by an institution when they come for oversight functions? Should they ask for money? I want to take these questions as quickly and rapidly as possible. And the second question says, please could you kindly shed more light on evidential powers as an oversight duty? And then maybe a third, does one need to join a political party before one can become a Senate member or a House of Assembly member? So can we take those three questions together briefly and concisely? Nella, does that work for you?
Yeah, but you may have to remind me.
Repeat them.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with the last.
Yeah.
Let's start with the last. Someone is asking if he or she needs to join a political party before
Yes.
he can become a Senate member or a House of Rep member. I think that's a yes or no
Yes.
answer.
The answer to that
And I
is
think
yes.
you
For
probably
now,
said yes.
in Nigeria, run for
Okay.
any office, you have to be a member of a political
Yes.
party. Yes.
Political party. Okay, good. And the second question, someone is asking you to shed more light on evidential powers as an oversight duty. Shed more light on evidential powers as an oversight duty. And then the second question is, should legislators be paid by an institution when they come for oversight functions? Should they ask for money in the performance of that duty or function? Yeah. All right.
Okay. All right. So the evidential powers, this is, I mean, it's as the name dictates, it's an opportunity for the legislative arm of government or the legislators to gather evidence. So just as in a court, you can subpoena a witness, in the legislative arm of government, you can summon someone to come and either to give more or shed more light on an issue or something you are in, like something the National Assembly is investigating. So it's usually connected to the investigative powers. And I gave the example of the former acting DG of NDC. That was a whole thing. He was summoned to come and shed more light on the issues that they they were being accused of as a body, and well, we know how that went. But that because he was invited, he didn't show up. Then he was summoned. So that is part of that that power. They can summon someone to the National Assembly, and that's, I'm sure you see that on TV, where you have the senator sitting like sort of on a high table, and then you have the gallery where you have the person who's giving the evidence will be sitting in front with a microphone, and then you have cameras and people behind. Now that's usually an investigative process, but that activity is often giving evidence. So that's the evidential power that they have. I hope that explains that. And then the other question was, can they ask for money? No, that would be illegal, because if you think about that, they're asking the person, like, let's take away laws and everything. Let's just think about that practically. You're saying, hey, pay me to come and check what you're doing out. So you are going to say everything is great. They've put the plaster where it's supposed to be. They've built the school. They've followed all protocols. They've spent public funds well, because they're going to pay you for that. So that's literally, they will be collecting, either you can call it a bribe or that's misconduct. So yeah, no, that's illegal. That is the according to the law, that is illegal. I think that answers that question. And even just morally, sorry, I just said morally, that's very wrong. So yeah, no, they're not supposed to ask anybody for money.
Okay, great. We have two questions that bother on recalling legislative signing of the petition by half of the registered voters in a particular constituency. Can the legislative still challenge the petition in the court of law? Or better still, what's the prospect of successfully recalling it who represents his constituency poorly? And the second question, closely linked, says, in considering the passage of the bill during the section where electorates are invited, do they really consider the sayings of these electorates, and what should motivate us for this kind of dialogues?
Okay. So for the first one, if a legislator can sue, it's not in the constitution that they can sue, and so as far as that section in the procedural aspect of it, no. But I'm just thinking in practice, No, like just from a legal point of view, off the top of my head, no, it hasn't been done yet because it's the people's constitutional right. So if the people say we put you there and you aren't serving us properly, we don't want you anymore. You can't fight the people. It's their right. So no, I mean, if someone thinks otherwise, I would be interested to have that conversation. But no, you can't. The legislator can't go to court. Run again. I think he can run again, and if he convinces the people that they made a mistake, then he will go back into office. But he won't be able to go through the courts. Then the last question was, please remind me.
Okay, the last question had to do with the sayings of the electorate. Are they really considered when they're called for dialogues?
Yeah.
During the passage of the bill. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this is a committee. So this part is a committee stage. So usually in a committee, you'd have the clerk of the committee, you'd have the other staff of that committee, and I know I'm explaining this, and you even have consultants, then you'd have the legislators. So, and then you have the public who would be present for that. Usually it varies, the types of people who will come before the committee or the National Assembly, well, the committee would vary depending on the type of issue at hand, the bill or the petition, even because of a petition. So it depends on whatever it is. Now, whenever you come before a committee, you submit a document. You don't just show up and talk. They will usually submit. It's all they are part of the administrative process. So the legislators are supposed to, even after that interaction, they're supposed to go back and deliberate on all the opinions and advice or recommendations that have been preferred by everybody, including individuals, whoever has come before the committee. Now, this is supposed to be a big part of the decision that the chairman will go and present on the floor of the House, the chairman of that committee. In theory, yes, it is a very, very big part, and it's supposed to play a major role. In practice, the truth is it varies. It varies. Sometimes we're just speaking honestly. Sometimes it may not hold as much water. Sometimes it would. But it really varies. And it also depends on how much interrogation the respective committee members had on that document. So, on the various documents. And sometimes a party may feel they were not, their interests were not captured. But the truth is maybe another side was more convincing. So it really varies. There's no, I can't say yes or no to that. I think that was there another one with that question? I think that was it. Additional, are you there?
Oh, yes, sorry, I was speaking. I didn't know that I hadn't unmuted.
Sorry.
Okay, so we'll take the last two questions before Ernest is asked to unmute. So this question says, what type of bills are the reps expected to sponsor? Are they different from that of the House of the Senate? So that's one question. What type of bills are the House of Reps expected to sponsor? And are these different from the Senate? The second question says, it has become a norm that when heads of ministries, departments, and parastatals are invited or summoned to appear before the National Assemblies, the Senate representatives, what was the attempt to summon the president? Okay, so this is just to ask for your personal opinion on this. Helena, did you get that?
I did. I missed the end, but I think I got the general gist. So the first one, which was I don't know what's happening in my memory.
Hold on. The reps, the type of bills, the
yes.
type of bills, the reps, and yes,
Yes,
a
yes,
bit
yes,
different
yes.
from that of
Thank
the
you.
Senate.
I
Okay.
remember. Thank you. That one. So no, they're not different. They're just two separate houses, and they can pass the same type of bills. There's no exemption. The difference should be in the underlying representative capacity, I guess, because one, you're thinking of your state as a whole and your senatorial district within that state. That's if the bill is specific to maybe a certain interest. So you'll probably be thinking, okay, my senatorial district as a whole, and then my state as a whole, and then Nigeria as a whole. But then maybe a House of Reps will be thinking my constituency, because constituencies are made up of local governments. For the House of Rep, constituencies are made up of a few local governments, as opposed to a senator who represents all the local governments within a senatorial district. So a House of Rep will probably be like 4 local governments, rarely 4, but 3 mostly. And then a senator would be the whole senatorial district. So I think it will be more about the stretch of your representation as opposed to the issues, because ultimately anything under the exclusive legislative list, a House of Rep member can sponsor a bill in relation to that, and a senator can sponsor a bill in relation to that. Now, the second question about, I hope that answers it. Second question about when MDA heads are summoned. Well, again, that's separation of powers and the power that each arm has. If the executive arm of government really is accountable to the legislative arm of government, if they summon you as an MDA head, you should show up. But if you feel that we can, now this is, you asked for a personal opinion. And so this is me as part of the electorate, I'm speaking. If you feel as an MDA head in my own country, someone who I have put in office through my vote has called you, or people who me and my fellow brothers and sisters in this nation called you to come and explain why you think this should be included in your budget, or should come and explain why the utility of certain funds are questionable, or come and explain why every single year people are driven out of their homes because of flooding, and you haven't really addressed the issue, and you don't show up. It shows me how you place me, because it's my representative, it's someone who I've put in there that has summoned you. So if we speak of it, broadly speaking, it's how highly does the executive arm of government regard the oversight functions of the legislative arm of government? How often, how regularly have they gotten away with certain things? So to me, that is the answer to that question. If those two arms of government understand, if I don't answer, the people would react, they will show up and not send somebody to speak for them, because ultimately you are the leader of that MDA, so you should speak for the MDA. I think that was, it wasn't really a question, it was more like a conversation, I guess. So I don't know if there was a question in there. I hope I've answered it if there was.
Okay. All right. So we'll take two individuals. We hope to wrap this up at 6:30. So please kind of keep your questions as short as possible. I know we have Habila, we had Ernest raise his hand earlier, except he is no longer. So please let's unmute Habila and let's have his question.
Okay. Hello, good evening, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you for your lectures and the opportunity to engage. Still on the oversight responsibility of the legislature. So I'm actually, of course, interestingly, you are a legal practitioner. And so I'm looking at the legal, the technical structures that allow this, allow the legislature to perform their oversight function. I remember a case in question when they asked the DG of one MDA to explain the salaries of the organization. And so for me, questions like that don't ask, makes me question if the National Assembly are regularly having access to documents of operations. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
So my question is, how accessible are documents of operations of these ministries, department, and parastatal to the National Assembly, the legislators, to enable them? Okay, let me now use as somebody in the university, we have this thing where, they say department should provide social documents, and that creates opportunity for falsification of information and so on. So if it's at the point of investigation that documents are available to National Assembly, then how effective do they perform their oversight functions? So my question is, what are the legal structure that protect the oversight responsibility of the, especially with regards to access to information?
Okay, thank you for your question. An MDA, any ministry, department, or agency, these are public institutions, and therefore there's, unless it is a confidential document, these are documents that are meant to be publicly available. Operations, or their spending, their because a lot of the issues that tend to come up are spending specific, like financial issues, really. That's the honest truth. And these are meant to be publicly available, really. But in terms of why they would ask them to explain, because sometimes, numbers, you can't really get the full picture from just the numbers. So that's why that is there. Come and explain to us why this is happening or why this is that. Now, in terms of the legal structures available to the legislators to access these documents without going through this specific oversight function. Well, those documents are actually freely available, and the legislative arm of government has the power to conduct audits on these institutions. So they don't always have to summon them. They can actually just audit their records, audit their documents. Ideally, so those provisions are there, which is why sometimes people say our problem as a country is not laws and the constitution or the legislations available, is the implementation of these things. If you really dig sometimes, like if you have you can even have an exercise, maybe in the course of this your cohort, one, they just have an issue with Nigeria, either the executive or legislative or judiciary, so that there's pick a specific problem that you do not know the solution to already, and then research the legislation available, the constitution available, our public policies or the conventions and treaties we have signed to. The solution is there. It may not be the best, but there's a starting point. It's the implementation of these things that is often the problem. We could do better with our legislation, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the time, the problem is not in the writing, it's in the implementation, it's in the actors. So I hope that answered your question. But Yeah.
Yes, I think it did. So thank you so much. I have seen questions or comments about when the class is supposed to end. So ideally, this class should be for an hour, 30 minutes, and we're way past that. I'd like to, on this note, like to round off the session. It has been a lot of information, a lot of learning, simply simplified in its simplest form, and we have indeed gained a lot. Thank you to everyone who has been a part of the class today. Please kindly show appreciation to Nella and Daniela for availing herself for the opportunity. She has given her time and resources to be here. I think she has done a fantastic again sometimes, to basically share her knowledge and wisdom with us. Thank you so much, Nella.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening.
All right.
And it's 181. So I was like one of, it's 181 days in the Constitution.
Okay, thank you for that. We saw that also in the chat box. 101 days that they ought to sit minimum. Okay, great. Lisa, do you have final words for the students today? Next.
Oh yeah, no, I don't
Friday,
think I have
5
anything
p.m.
to
same
say
time.
now.
All right. Okay, so just to say one or two things on the Telegram group, there are messages that come per time, so it's important that we keep our eyes on the Telegram group. Put your focus also on the pinned messages per time, because there are critical information that would help. Distribution into political parties would start and will commence next week, so let's also take note of that and be informed. Thank you very much for staying on till this time, and hope to see you next week. So have yourself a wonderful start of the week. Cheers. Bye-bye.